Cathy Casserly is the recently appointed Chief Executive Officer of Creative Commons, and she joins us today via Skype from her office in California. Cathy, good morning. You've been involved with Creative Commons for quite a while now, haven't you? Creative Commons vision, our vision is nothing less than realising the full potential of the internet, universal access to research and education, full participation in culture to drive a new era of development, growth and productivity. Is a pretty ambitious one. How would you assess the organisation's progress against that vision since it was formed 10 years ago?
That's right. I've been involved with Creative Commons since 2001. At that point in time, I was at the ULIT Foundation and I was beginning to work in the area of open educational resources. So we were trying to figure out how to distribute high quality, free educational materials on the web and how to deal with the intellectual property issues. And we really were focused very much on the content area and the curriculum area, but very quickly began to understand we needed to understand the infrastructure, we needed to understand the intellectual property issues, both in the United States and globally, since we were funding across the world. And so we went down and met with Larry Lessig at Stanford, who was then, when Creative Commons was Larry and one grad student out of his office at the Stanford campus, and provided some early support for Creative Commons at that time. Clearly seemed like a big idea, the right brain power behind it, and it was the time to really explore how we can benefit all from the internet.
You've been in the role of Chief Executive for just a few months. Can you tell me your impressions of the job and of the challenges that you think you face?
I was also, I funded actually through multiple waves of funding. So I've been, with the organization since 2001. I became a board member a few years ago. So I've now had this multiple experiences of both being a funder, a board member, and now the CEO. I think it is different being the CEO because while I certainly understood the organization and the challenges, I think it feels very different from when you sit actually in the seat of the CEO. So I guess what I have been overwhelmingly impressed by, in some ways what I've always known, but I hadn't experienced firsthand, is the incredible support Creative Commons has from the global community. So whether it's at a funders meeting where there's nonprofit leaders from across the world, they are out there voicing the support for Creative Commons and our mission, whether it's with individuals who work with our affiliate network, we have champions all over the world. It's really, frankly, quite extraordinary. Whether it's yesterday, I was on a conference call with OECD out of Paris, and really they're trying to look at the policy implications around using Creative Commons and open licensing. So I feel like we're really in this point of time where we have a huge momentum. It's been a very incredible, solid base and growth. And for me to be here now at this point in time, I just feel quite honored because it's an amazing point in time in the history of the organization. And I actually feel like my skill sets match this point of time in the organization as well.
Can we talk about the role that Creative Commons might have in the world of journalism? You've got your Journalism 2.0 project running in Bay schools in the San Francisco area. How's that gone? And at the time you launched it, you had hopes that it might become a national project. Is that still on the cards?
Well, journalism is clearly an area that we continue to think hard about. We know it has huge impact, and again, we know it has huge distribution. I think as we think about journalism, we're actually now entering a phase this summer where we're really going through and reassessing our strategic priorities and our strategic plan. And journalism is very much a core focal area of that strategic alignment. I've also been talking with others at the Knight Foundations and others who are very interested in the role of journalism and how Creative Commons steps into that space. So while that was a pretty interesting project and we worked on a pilot level and again beginning to think about it at a national level, as we step back and think about the role of Creative Commons and where we can have the most impact, I think one of the challenges for the organization over the last decade is as it was growing, as it was beginning to understand where it could have impact, we touched a lot of corners of the world. We touched a lot of projects. We really tried to evaluate where we could have the wins, where we can spend our resources of time and effort most effectively. And I think probably one of the greatest challenges for us going forward that we'll begin to examine this summer is what is the return on investment in particular areas? And will we maybe have to say no to some areas or just be very clear on our boundaries and efforts so that we can really develop kind of that deep expertise. So journalism is certainly, we do see it as a critical area. We know from having journalistic organizations who have been part of Creative Commons, like Al Jazeera, have been incredibly important as we look at worldwide events and how information gets distributed about those events across the world. And so that may very clearly be a highest priority. But we do want to do over this next few months is really examine, as we look in journalism and as we look at the various aspects of it, where are the leverage points for Creative Commons vis-a-vis other organizations, and how can we really maximize the opportunities that are there?
As Creative Commons licensed content continues to grow on the internet, can you see that reducing the barriers to entry in the world of journalism?
I think what we see ourselves as providing an alternative to what exists in the marketplace currently. And we know that the marketplace is changing anyway because of technology, because of distribution. So I think what we see is that through the blogs, through obviously all the other media avenues that exist, that individuals, that organizations are trying new ways to get the information out to people. And I do see Creative Commons being part of that ecosystem that provides that kind of support and provides these different alternatives in the marketplace as the world changes in very dramatic ways.
You recently announced a partnership agreement between YouTube and Creative Commons. That must be very significant. And can you see further partnerships like that coming down the line?
You know, I think we see all sorts of partnerships coming down the line, and sometimes we're not quite sure when they're going to arrive. So the partnership with YouTube was interesting because there had been conversations over many years, and then all of a sudden the switch got flipped, and we were delighted that it got flipped. And clearly, what we we're particularly happy about it is because this is such a large platform. It gives us, while we've been obviously approached and understood by the early adopters, it gives us the ability to move more into the mainstream for people to become even more familiar with Creative Commons and the licensing and the opportunities for remix and building on others' creativity. And so for us, that was a big win. Let me just mention another partnership. Just 2 days ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and we announced a partnership with the American Educational Publishers, and we're going to be working with them to co-lead a project based on metadata schema. So schema.org has recently announced just last week that the big search engines, Google, Yahoo, and Bing, are going to be coming together and adopting different schema. In the education is going to be the first industry that will take this on, and we've now created this partnership where we will work jointly to work with the education community to come up with the metadata schema for learning assets. And we'll be the leadership group and convene the working group, but in many ways we have to work with the full community to do this, and this includes both the open community and the current publishing community as well. And so we have this opportunity now to really, I think, address some of the issues that we've had, particularly around search and discovery of learning assets, and have a chance to really come together around a common framework.
Are there examples that you can think of where Creative Commons has had an impact on the world of journalism?
You have to become mainstream in the way that maybe Wikipedia is mainstream, or the way YouTube is mainstream. There might be other examples I could quickly think of, but those quickly come to mind. So what you do is you need to have enough of an adoption. And I guess sometimes I think when people use the word mainstream, I hope they don't think that we're turning then to lose our innovative and cultural edge, that we're going to somehow compromise the values of Creative Commons, which has really pushed innovation at the edge and creativity at the edge. I think by becoming mainstream, I think maybe it's an exchange of words about really becoming fully aware and adopted in the broader community. Whether people choose to use us or not, they are aware of that alternative. So certainly, as we know in the world, everyone knows Wikipedia. Maybe not everyone logs into Wikipedia when they're looking for knowledge or content area. And so what we do hope certainly is to become as well known as YouTube and Facebook and Wikipedia, so people are aware of this option with intellectual property. And clearly we know that as the world has changed, as the internet came into existence, the law just didn't change quickly enough, and there's been no way to share content. Digital rights issues have dominated, and what we've wanted to do is give creators the alternative, the option. I think in moving to the mainstream, one of the things that we are beginning to see is that there's a lot of public, excuse me, a lot of public money at work. And a lot of the public money at work tends to get locked down. And so what we've been particularly trying to encourage is that public dollars can be used for public purposes, and that those materials don't need to be locked down, but continue to be innovated in the future. And the most recently in the United States, there was a Department of Labor Work Trade Adjustment Act where $2 billion over 4 years will be used to create content and materials to prepare the workforce, and it's going to be placed inside community colleges. And one of the big wins around that grant process is that any material that is created with this federal money is required to have a Creative Commons by license. So in some ways, we see that as an example of moving into the mainstream. But most importantly, I think what we see is that this gives us a great avenue and a great ability for people to really understand that there needs to be alternatives to how public dollars are used at times.
Let me read you a quote, Cathy. It's from Joe Reifer, a US-based photographer. "I've struggled to understand why anyone would use a Creative Commons license for photographs when you can simply copyright your images and maintain control over who uses them." What would you say to someone who says that?
You know, I think for him, if that's his choice, then I think clearly that's the choice he should choose. I think if he's created the artwork or created the photo, or anyone who creates a photo and wants it to be used and to be disseminated, and for other people to actually enjoy the creativity of that particular individual, there's a much more likely success of that if they actually use the Creative Commons license, because it reduces the friction. Someone may go to a website and find this photographer's photo and then see it has a copyright, and then would have to find a way to locate him, to ask him if they could use the photo in a brochure or whatever it might be, their wedding, whatever it might be. And there may be a transaction cost of whatever he might charge, and it could happen, but it's so time consuming and transaction costs are high that people just don't have the time to do that. And I think a lot of people create because one is because it's just their passion and they do want to share. And I also think that we need to be clear that we're not trying to take away the livelihood of photographers or others who need clearly a revenue generating model. We all need to pay rent and we all need to eat. It's very, very true. And so I think what people have found, and we have many photographers in our community who have blended, sometimes putting some of their works under intellectual property and sometimes putting under Creative Commons. I should say we have a book coming out this month everyone should be looking for, and we'll be announcing it very shortly. But the book will tell stories about creators from around the world, exemplars of who have used Creative Commons license to their benefit, because they have become discovered, because they have known, because they created in order to share. That is the mission. And they've been able to use the Creative Commons license as an avenue to do that.
For a young person setting out in the world of journalism today, what's the significance of Creative Commons and how should they use it?
So I think actually what I don't want to do is preview the book that we have coming out, but I'll make sure I'll send it to you and make sure you can promote it as well. But there are many examples. Let me just say as a quick example in general, if you're someone like Madonna, you don't need to use the Creative Commons license. People know you, they find you, they're willing to pay for your work. We often use the example of 9 Inch Nails. That's one that's often been cited on our website. Again, they've been able to use the power of the Creative Commons license to become better known, for fans to really love them and to really be able to distribute. I think when we're thinking about the journalism issue, I would say this is still a new frontier. I would say this is an area that's still unexplored, and we don't exactly know how the Creative Commons licensing in that domain, how it maps from free culture. You know, we've moved it from free culture, we've begun to move it to education and textbooks and educational materials. Governments are thinking a lot about it. We think a lot about it in the science space, but I think in many ways the journalism is still unknown, and so in some ways that's very exciting, how we can create a terrain which will support the mission of journalism, which will support the ability of journalists to continue to share the great stories that they share, and at the same time be able to continue to support exemplary journalism and have a industry that is viable. Because it has to be viable through market mechanisms. Again, people need to be rewarded for their work. They need to be paid. And how do we combine both that sustainability model and that ability to distribute overall?
Have you got strong established links with journalism colleges across the US?
You know, one of our board members is a very well-renowned journalism, particularly here in this region. She's been awarded a national award for her teaching in journalism, Esther Wojcicki, and she's very much tied into the journalism community. So we often look for her to really lead us and help us think through this space, and very well connected, again, often speaking at journalism conferences and really beginning to help us think through this space in a significant way.
Final question. Let me ask you to get your crystal ball out for this one, Cathy. What do you think the future holds for Creative Commons? And do you believe that your grand vision for the organisation can be achieved?
I think it absolutely can be achieved. I think if we go back 10 years to the day I met Larry Lessig on the campus at Stanford, providing support for the early seeding of Creative Commons, I think we have already, at this point in time, have been incredible and really in some ways exceeded our wildest dreams of where we could get to. The global spread, the take-up, the understanding of the Creative Commons license. That said, we are not complete. We are not there. Just like you clearly mentioned, we are not known in the mainstream. We are known in certain communities. We are known in certain fields. And what we do need to do is move across this hurdle, which they call from the early adopters to the mainstream. You have to travel over that chasm. And once you can make that leap, that's really the holy grail at some point. And so I would say in this next 3 to 5 years, we're really pushing hard to make it into the mainstream, to really become well known, to kind of build on this amazing momentum I think that we've been able to achieve. And I think there's also a point in time, and I was just mentioning this with my call with OECD yesterday, is that we're in an inflection point. The space feels very differently from it did even a few years ago when there was a bit of a lull. And particularly, I don't know about other spaces, but in education and perhaps in journalism as well, because of the downturn in the economy, it forces people to be more creative. It forces people to be more innovative. We have to use resources efficiently and be far more collaborative. And that's all the things that the Creative Commons license does. And so automatically, by having these tools and mechanisms available, people are now seeing them as an opportunity to both reach their mission and I think to succeed the mission that we have absolutely set forth for ourselves.
Cathy, thanks very much indeed for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the interview. Bye-bye.